So 12 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you were right now. I was at the final PDC, the Professional Developers Conference, that was hosted right here on campus. There was a huge tent. Golnaz, do you remember it? Yes. There was a huge tent. It was rainy. It was my first time ever in the Pacific Northwest. I was a young, scrappy 20-something writing WinForms applications with a WCF backend, talking to Silverlight web apps, and it was glorious. It was my first job out of college, and I was writing printer software. And it was great. Granted, I did go to school to be a game developer. How things have changed for myself. I was sitting here because my company, Canon, that I worked for, had a training budget. And I said, I would like to go travel. I've never traveled anywhere but besides Ohio and Arizona, where I went to school. And sure, why not? I'd love to go learn about everything that was happening in the world of .NET development and all the cool things happening at Microsoft. I'd never seen a city so glorious when I went into Seattle. I never saw an interesting landscape of Redmond, Washington ever in my life, of nothing, and then Microsoft campus. It was me on campus for the first time that made me want to work for Microsoft. Being here, being entrenched in it, really sparked my interest in what else I could do. As I walked through those same doors that have not changed in 12 years. There is now another EBC where there was a conference room. I was handed my first smartphone device that I, as a C# developer, could actually develop for. I was handed our first unlocked Windows Phone 7 devices. I ran back after the sessions learning about building mobile applications with XAML and all the cool things that I could do. I was back at my hotel, and I literally, in the first night, started writing my very first mobile application. Within a week, I built a podcast application for the podcast that I was doing in my spare time, and I released it into the store. I did something for myself. Before that, I was always working for someone. I was working at the game startup for basically $0 and a bunch of emotional abuse. Then I was writing printer software. I love printer software. It was really cool enterprise printer software. So if you're going to write printer software, it should be enterprise printer software with huge printers the size of this desk. But for me, it was a pivotal moment in my life. I was given a device. I was given software. I was given the world's best IDE in the world with the best programming language that I could sit down and be super hyper productive and make something for myself that I wanted that I could then give to other people and distribute myself. And as a C# .NET developer, that was really special to me. I didn't have to worry about MSIX installers or Wix installers or all this other shenanigans. I didn't have to be an expert in databases. I didn't have to be an expert in crazy enterprise architecture. I could sit there and I could just write code and I could make something on the screen do something. It brought me back to my first Hello World application that I ever built. It was a magical moment. These magical moments only happen so often. And for me, these magical moments have been happening every single year as we see the industry continue to innovate, bring us new, faster devices, but give us new APIs as developers that we can unlock. And I think for me, now being a mobile developer, building applications for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows for over 12 years, all without ever having to write a single line of Java, Kotlin, Swift, or Objective-C code has been a really magical moment for me. It changed my trajectory, where I immediately quit that Canon job and moved my life up here to the Pacific Northwest in a small job in Kirkland, Washington, not too far away from here, where I became their solo mobile developer, building all of my applications with Xamarin and .NET. I loved it so much that I went to go work for Xamarin. I was like, this is the future. This is what I want to do. I worked at Xamarin as a developer advocate, helping people around the globe learn how to build, like I did, mobile applications with C# and .NET. And now I'm here at Microsoft for the last 6 years after being acquired by Microsoft, and to see what has happened in the world of .NET and the amazing ecosystem and the community around it and the types of applications that we can build has been absolutely mesmerizing. And I'm so excited to be part of it and hope that you all are as excited as me about what we're doing for developers to build beautiful native cross-platform mobile and desktop apps. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. The thing that changed my life 12 years ago, if you're in that same spot, writing WinForms applications, you can keep writing WinForms apps. They'll be around forever. I still write them on occasion. You're at a point now where you might be ready to jump in. Your business might be ready to jump in, or you're just looking for something new. Or you've been writing mobile applications and desktop applications in multiple languages, and you're like, you know what? the time is to actually have a unified front across all of our teams. I've talked to a few software engineering companies that said, hey, my company is 90% .NET. And we're looking to see what's next. Do we change? Do we pivot? And I was like, well, do you fire 90% of your company? I hope not. There's a few of them here in the audience, and they're like, yeah, I hope not, because that's them. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to explore everything that we have to offer with our new solutions, not only with .NET MAUI, but also with some hybrid application. If you are a web developer, bringing some of that web and creating hybrid applications, leveraging .NET MAUI, our multi-platform app UI. Now, just like I did 12 years ago, I scanned this QR code and I immediately filled out the session survey. No, I don't know, you could definitely do that. Danielle and the team, they would love it if you just, will open that app, scan that QR code, found me, don't do it right now. You're like, wow, great opening, 3 stars. Wait until the end, but make sure you do that. That'd be super important to me. Now, here's what I think is really fascinating about .NET. I have this slide almost all the time. You may have seen it about 1 billion times, but I think it's the most magical slide in the entire world. Because there's really nothing like .NET. It is the most unified development app platform out there. No matter if you want to build cloud apps, web apps, desktop apps, mobile apps, games, IoT, AI. Not only are there great things from Microsoft, but from the community. Think about it. How many games, which is my origin, are now built with .NET? Every single Unity game is all built with .NET and C#. That's hundreds of thousands of games and game developers out there building with Unity, using Visual Studio for Mac or VS Code. You want to do AI or machine learning? We have all the things. We can do big data with Spark. We can put .NET on a Raspberry Pi. When I was in this building 12 years ago, I could put .NET on my Windows machine and my Windows Phone machine, and I guess Windows Server. And that was it. In 12 years, not only has .NET gone to all of these amazing platforms, but it's also been optimized and streamlined into a single unified runtime with .NET 6, giving us as developers common base libraries, common infrastructure, and a great ecosystem that's been built up over the last 20 years since .NET came around. Now for me, and maybe for you while you're here, you want to build stuff like this. Amazing desktop applications, amazing iPhone, Android applications, and of course, make sure that those apps can run on tablets as well. Now for me, this is my bread and butter. These are the things that I love. I am not a web developer. I don't understand it. I one time tried to make a button click happen, and I was like, where's the code running? And my wife's a web developer, and she's like, it's on the server. And I was like, what? And I was like, but I pressed the button, it should do stuff. And she's like, this JavaScript thing is calling this thing. And I'm like, I'm gone. Because I want to live in this beautiful world that I know and love as a front-end mobile developer. I want to build for these different platforms. And that is why we as Microsoft brought .NET to these different platforms through Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android. Now with .NET 6, the Xamarin name may have gone away, but that same core infrastructure that I'll talk about today is there with .NET 6 for iOS and Android and Mac. But for me as a developer, where I started is I was building different UIs for every single platform, but still sharing a bulk of my business logic, my models, view models, RESTful service code, things like that. As a developer, I was happy. I was getting great native UI. I was sharing code everywhere. But for me, I always thought it would sure be great if I could just write my UI once in a single thing that I know and would still produce native UI across each platform. And that's where Xamarin as a company developed Xamarin Forms and now has evolved into .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI is our native cross-platform UI framework and so much more for building great native applications from a single code base across iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, and additionally other platforms from the community and from other companies like Samsung and Tizen devices. So to me as a developer that has been living and building these applications, having a single unified framework with a single unified runtime and a single development environment helps me not only write less code, be more productive, but also make sure that my applications are great for my end users. .NET MAUI itself is unified in .NET 6. This means that everything that is coming with .NET 6 those base class libraries, type unification, CLI support, SDK style support, modern support lifecycle, everything with .NET, which I'll talk about today, is all part of .NET MAUI. So fundamental that it is literally a workload part of .NET. The .NET team, with .NET MAUI team being part of the .NET team, work together to say, hey, how do we make sure that we can add new platforms to .NET and support them? So when you install .NET, you install the .NET MAUI workload, which brings in the iOS workload, Android workload, Mac OS workload, and Windows workload. So as .NET evolves, there's a single unified process to bring in these new environments. Now here we see that with .NET MAUI, we also get a unified mobile, desktop, and hybrid story. I'm going to talk about both of those today, mostly focusing on native, but I will touch on hybrid if you are a web developer or have web developers at your company and how you can collaborate better together. This means that we get to develop with .NET MAUI and deploy across WinUI, Mac, iOS, and Android. And I'll talk exactly what that Mac Catalyst thing is a little bit later on. And finally, for me as a developer, I want to be super productive. I want to use C#, I want to use XAML, I want to use the world's best IDEs with Visual Studio and get super productive features like hot reload, visual diagnostics, debugging, performance monitoring, everything like that. And that's what we get. So what this means as developers is that we get a single shared code base. And this code base is bigger than ever. In fact, this is going to be 99 or nearly 100% of your code, depending on your application. This shared code on the bottom is all your UI, all written in C# or XAML, your resources like your images, icons, string translations, styles, and so much more. All of your business logic, like your models, view models, RESTful service calls, SQL databases, Azure integrations, RESTful service backends, any other cloud provider backend, different plugins for analytics and crash reporting. That's all going to be in that shared code base from a single API. You want to use any .NET API like SignalR? It's available to you right away. It also is where you can access platform features from .NET MAUI's cross-platform native API library that's built directly into .NET MAUI, and I'll talk about that. So if you want to access things like connectivity, sensors, geolocation, it's all available. But the most beautiful part that I've always really appreciated about the architecture of Xamarin and now .NET MAUI is that you still have access to all of the different platforms, but in C#. So if you want to access APIs in iOS, Android, Mac, or Windows, you can do that. Because sometimes there's platform very specific features that you want to get a hold of. And you still have access to those directly in C# from your project. And we'll take a look at that today. Now the great part here as a .NET MAUI developer is that boom, you just use Visual Studio 2022. You get all of the great code editing features, live share features, Git integration. You get all of the great IntelliSense coming in from XAML, from C#. If you're doing web development with Razor and CSS, you get all of that. It also has a unified deployment system, which we'll take a look at, to really easily deploy across iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows. And of course, if you're over on a Mac, like I'm going to be over here, you also have Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. This is going to be built from the ground up with native UI and M1 native support, which is what I have right here with my MacBook Air. And of course, has everything that you may want to do with .NET 6 development. If you're doing web development, API development, and of course, .NET MAUI development too. Now, one of my favorite features for me as a developer is the unification of .NET MAUI into a single project, single code base that is multi-targeted. So this screenshot here has the application running in light mode and dark mode across Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows. And what we see on the right-hand side is a single project. Every single thing that I will write and share between these applications is directly in this project. This means if I need to add raw assets, images, fonts, app icons, splash screens, styles, access platform capabilities, I can do that directly inside of this single project and swap between them elegantly. No longer do I have to toggle and load up 14 different solutions and projects. I just have one project, which is my application. Now, beyond that, I think what's really important from a high level is that thing is native. What's important to me is that I am not only productive as a developer, but that I'm giving my users a great native experience. Now, what does that mean? Because a lot of times native is thrown around. You have like native in framework titles. We're talking about native APIs, native UI. What does that actually mean at the end of the day? Well, to me and to the .NET MAUI team, I think what it really means is that when you're building an application with that framework, it's using the native underlying infrastructure and giving you access to those native APIs that are available to native language developers. So this means on Android, we're using Android widgets to display buttons. We're accessing APIs and having through C#, but the same ones that are available in Java or Kotlin. Same thing for iOS. We're using UIKit to render our user interface, but we have access to all of those great APIs like ARKit, CarPlay, and so much more. On macOS, for example, we're actually going to be using the latest macOS technology, which is Mac Catalyst, which is taking iOS applications and bundling them into native Mac apps and lighting them up with unique capabilities. And it's a blend of UIKit and AppKit. AppKit's the macOS UI. As a developer, I get a great app that runs everywhere. And this is a tough battle for the .NET MAUI team. Do we go with just AppKit apps? Do we go with Mac Catalyst apps? And .NET MAUI came out of this perfect time, which is learning a lot from Xamarin and Xamarin Forms, but also taking a look at what is Google, what is Apple, and what is here Microsoft doing with Windows development itself. It's a very clear indication that when you're on a Mac, half of those applications from Apple are Mac Catalyst now. It's a clear direction moving forward as they invest in that platform. And on Windows, we use the latest and greatest technology to develop and build those applications. We're using WinUI 3, which is the most modern, up-to-date UI framework from Microsoft, and the Windows App SDK. Now, what's great here is that you, of course, also have access to everything that is available as a Windows developer. You can package up those applications, deploy it internally, deploy it to the store, or whatever you want to do. So what does this actually mean? Right, I'm talking about these APIs being available. When you think about it, iOS has a bunch of APIs. .NET has a bunch of APIs in it, right? So you have things like MapKit, UIKit, SiriKit, ARKit, CoreML. These are iOS APIs. And what the .NET team does is they take those APIs and create C# bindings, almost wrappers around them, sort of p-invoking into those native APIs. So me, as a .NET MAUI developer, I have access to MapKit, UIKit, SiriKit, all from C#. Which is really powerful. Same thing true for Android. All those native Android APIs are available to me as a developer in C# APIs. This is really powerful, and one of the biggest distinguishing factors as an C# iOS and Android and Mac developer is that we have access to those APIs without having to go down a layer to Swift, to Java, to Kotlin. I don't have to open up different tools, I don't have to compile different things. It also means that if you have an Android library or an iOS library, you can create your own C# wrappers around them as well. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it totally is possible. So when you look at some different SDKs that are out there, for example, Sentry, which is a performance and crash reporting tool, they have a native iOS and Android library. They create a binding around that, and then they do a bunch of .NET stuff around it to give you a cross-platform API. That's kind of what the .NET MAUI team did. They expose all of these APIs and create an interface on top of them for you to access them. Now we have access to the APIs, and we're creating native apps, but when I mean native, I mean it also goes through a native optimized compilation. For iOS and Android, we have ahead of time compilation available. iOS applications can only be ahead of time compiled to release to the App Store. It takes all your .NET, your C#, those bindings, does an AOT compilation. It also does tree shaking or trimming, if you will, during that process. So that .NET is sort of embedded into your application, but it's a very small, tight, optimized .NET. And what it does is, during that trimming, it removes any of those APIs that you're not using. So you're left with a really small, tight package, and it's just optimized. So your application deployed on iOS is self-contained, because apps are self-contained. On Android, we also, by default now, do a hybrid AOT JIT compilation. It's really nice. It takes advantage of the JITting that can be done on Android, but also performance boosting with ahead of time compilation on Android for faster startup time. And at the end of the day, what this produces is native binaries that can be deployed internally or to the App Store. Right? Same thing done for Mac and for Windows as well. And it also, of course, uses the latest technology from each of them. So on Android, for example, there's 2 file formats that Google has: APK, an Android package, and AAB, an Android app bundle. And Android app bundles are now the required way of doing it. And that is really nice because it packages up sort of a thick package that can then be torn apart by the Google servers when you deploy for Google Play to deliver an even smaller package to your user. Because on Android, it's Android. So there's like 8,000 billion different architectures and all sorts of different things that are going on. So it can optimize different packages on their server for their developers or their users. Now, what this means for you as a developer is that you get an awesome package, you get access to those APIs, but it also means that with .NET MAUI and .NET 6, your applications are just faster because the team has been finely tuning alongside the .NET Runtime team and the .NET MAUI team. We can see here on the left on this chart is just over here the milliseconds of startup time comparison between Xamarin Android and Android running on .NET 6. So that's using just Android stuff by itself, no .NET MAUI, that's the underlying platform. And then what we see on the right-hand side is .NET MAUI versus Xamarin Forms. So lower is better. So we want our apps to be faster. So nearly 70% faster for Android and almost 50% faster compared to Xamarin Forms. So even today, if you were a Xamarin Forms developer and you wanted to migrate, which you can do, all of your app code, all your UI is backwards compatible. There's going to be some namespace changes. You will get massive amounts of boosting performance there too. And there's tons of stuff in the box. We have support for MVVM and XAML. So if you're coming from the XAML world of WPF or Xamarin Forms or UWP, you have access to all that. There's tons of views and controls, graphics APIs, there's community toolkits that we're going to talk about today. There's all sorts of new capabilities built into .NET MAUI. There's brand new cross-platform 2D drawing engine that uses the native underlying platform. There's cross-platform icons, fonts, splash screens, and so much more. And when I talk about those controls are available out of the box, and there's 50 of them available. So you have things like images, buttons, sliders, card views, anything that you can really imagine to build your base level application. And how that works as a developer is that what we want to have happen is a single API to access those native controls. So let's say I wanted to access the UI activity progress bar on the different platforms. On iOS, well, that would be called a UI activity indicator and a progress bar on Android. And of course, different on Mac and on Windows. And what we have access to access those controls is a single activity indicator. So the team has abstracted those APIs and that name into just an activity indicator. The same thing for other controls like seek bar and slider are now just a slider. They have common controls, common properties, but are rendering those native controls when we display them on the screen. It also means with .NET MAUI, not only to get access to the native APIs, native UI, we get to take advantage of new native app platform capability. If you're coming from a desktop environment, this may not seem new, but if you're coming from the mobile world, it is brand new, which is multi-window support. And this is a huge deal because part of .NET MAUI being rewritten from the ground up to be performant and optimized and take advantage of the latest optimizations for each platform means that not only do I get multi-window support on desktop, but I also get it on other platforms when I'm running it on iPadOS, for example. I simply create a new window, open that window, and I have a brand new application. Now, I mentioned that those APIs for each platform are available, but I also mentioned that .NET MAUI has a bunch of things built in. So beyond the UI, there are over 70 different native platform features available from a single cross-platform API. Things like accessing the sensors, clipboard, file system, network, notifications, and so much more. So for example here is when I long press on an app icon or I right click on the menu bar, I want to see that different app actions or context menus come up. Traditionally, I'd have to go and write a bunch of code to handle that on the different platforms. With .NET MAUI, it's built in with the App Actions API. It's a single API that I can write those in just a few lines of code. We're going to take a look at that today. You're like, cool, looks like UI, James, but what about APIs? Like, what about geolocation? Well, it's like 4 lines of code. There's a single geolocation API where I can get access to last known location, request current location, all easily across the different platforms. And what this is doing is calling that platform-specific API directly for you. Now, what's cool about .NET MAUI is that not only does it take advantage of native UI, updated native performance, and native cross-platform API access, it also uses the latest .NET technologies that are out there, such as the built-in dependency injection service that comes from ASP.NET Core. So when the .NET MAUI team was developing these new APIs and bringing things over, they said, we want our applications to look and feel similar. If you're coming from the web world or you're coming to .NET MAUI for the first time, we want you to be able to go across .NET apps easily. So that means for geolocation, you of course have access to static things, but everything has an interface. So here I can register our services as singletons and transients. I can use dependency injection to pass those in through our constructor injection, and everything works super happy. Let's build an app. So I'm going to go over into Visual Studio 2022. Now I'm in the preview here, but this is the same version of 17.3, Visual Studio 2022, which is version 17. 17.3 is the latest release, which just came out on Tuesday, when we had our .NET MAUI conference, which you can find on the .NET YouTube. So I just decided not to update right before I do all my demos. But it's the same. So if you're on Windows, you can install 17.3 stable and you're good to go there. So .NET MAUI itself, the SDK GA'd in May, and now the tooling on Windows is final, and on Mac, Visual Studio 2022 for Mac, the latest preview has that there. So it's sort of a roller coaster of GA releases. So if I look over here, I have all my different project templates that are here, and I should say, well, how do I install .NET MAUI? Well, let me open up the Visual Studio installer over here, and when I go to modify, we can see here that I tapped on the .NET MAUI UI development checkbox. And that gives me everything that I need, bless you. Now, I have a bunch of other stuff installed because I am still writing some old UWP apps. I'm doing some web application development and Azure development. But if you just want to do .NET MAUI development and you're just looking to install, that's the only thing you need. It'll give you everything else that you need automatically there. And once you have that, you're going to go into this drop-down, and you'll see that there's a MAUI drop-down here. And this is going to give you 3 templates: a .NET MAUI app, a .NET MAUI Blazor hybrid application, and a class library. We'll talk about this one in the future, but let's start with the .NET MAUI application. Now here, I'm just going to go ahead and give it MAUI App 5. That sounds like a good name. Here we can see it's running on .NET 6. And when it updates to .NET 7, you'll have a drop-down for .NET 7 over here. And I'm just going to hit Create. All right. So let's go ahead and see what actually was created for me. So the first thing I want to do is talk about that single project system over here. Here, the first thing I can see is that I have these dependencies. And if you're coming from other projects and platforms, it's going to look really kind of funky. You're like, wait a second, what's happening here? Well, this is multi-targeting. We're basically telling this project that, hey, I'm going to deploy to multiple different project types. So I have Android over here with Android-specific dependencies. I have different frameworks, different analyzers here, all sorts of good stuff. Same thing for Mac Catalyst and iOS. So this enables me to transition between all the different platforms automatically. Down over here, I have resources. So all of these folders are cross-platform assets and resources like app icons. These are just SVGs that automatically get translated into native app icons. I have splash screen images and icons and assets here. I have raw assets. So if you wanted to add a JSON file or a SQL database to populate something, that's there. I have fonts, so just OTFs, TTFs. You can just add your favorite font. It'll automatically register, handle everything for you automatically for the different platforms. Images, PNGs, JPEGs, SVGs, handles everything for you automatically. Drop them in. Export them from Figma that your designer gave you, and boom, drop them in. We also have styles. This is one of my favorite parts that the .NET MAUI team did in this template, is they styled every control to adhere to light theme, dark theme modes, so you can override them with a few toggles. Now, when we open up this project and double tap on it, we're going to see a few things. I zoom out a little bit here. Let me do this. Boop. Go to settings. 50. There we go. That'd be better. Boop. Perfect. The first thing we're going to see is that we have just a normal project. We have these target frameworks. This over here is what is enabling me to target Android, iOS, Mac, and of course over here, if I'm on Windows, Windows as well. Now, you can add, remove things from there. It's up to you, but it's not going to hurt you to leave them around. You may choose to deploy to those platforms or not. So even if you're just writing an Android app, you could remove those different framework monikers if you want, or you can leave them. It's totally up to you. Here, this is going to use the latest features like a single project and using MAUI. This is telling it to use a single project, use .NET MAUI. And then here, this implicit usings are coming in as the new C# 10 features. But what I love about this is there's a bunch of other good stuff in here. They've also done the hard work of abstracting not only at a UI layer and API layer, but as sort of as an app publishing layer, all the stuff that you don't want to worry about, like the application title that shows up, application identifiers and GUIDs, display versions, application identifier versions, and also the supported platform version and target framework. So this is cool. So if you need to go in and you need to support older versions of iOS or Android or Windows or Tizen and things like this, you can adjust all from your CS Proj the single area here to do this, which is really, really cool. Down here, we have this other item group, and these are sort of lighting up those different resource folders. So we have a MAUI icon, a MAUI splash screen, MAUI images. This is cool. Actually, you can not only say, hey, include all of the images there, but that .NET Bot SVG that's going to be in there, the base size of the SVG is this, and then it knows how to properly resize that based on the base size. So you can actually optimize it if your designer's really, really picky. You can also add those custom fonts and the MAUI assets, and you're done. That's literally it. Like, that's everything that's in there.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, question, hit me.
When you're targeting the Windows, Android, iOS, can you target multiple versions of each one of those?
Oh, great question. The question was, can you target multiple versions of iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows? Yes. So what this here is saying, the supported platform, this is saying how far back do you want to support?
Okay.
You always support the most recent, but how far back do you want to go, basically? Now over here, we will see on Windows, there is this target framework. And Android and Windows also have this, which is like support this far back, and also I'm compiling against this latest one. By default, .NET MAUI will just target whatever you're compiling against currently, but you can always override that as well. But yeah, for Android, you would set the supported, but also the target. You could set the same target for Android as well. Yeah, by default, it defaults to the latest version that you're compiling against. But let's say you're like, you know, on Android, I'm not ready to support Android, I don't know, whatever it is, 28 or whatever. You could change that to 27.
Okay.
Yeah. Which sometimes is necessary on Android when they introduce new features and you're not ready to update it yet. But that being said, I would say everybody is now being way more particular about it. I think Android gives you a year or two to really keep her moving. So this is cool. What this is saying here, for example, is that I support all the way back to iOS 14.2, but I'm going to obviously run on iOS 16 as well, and 15 and 16. Now, .NET MAUI itself supports way older versions as well. I think it supports iOS like 11 as well. So if you need to go all the way back, you can do that as well. And on the documentation, you can find all that reference information there as well. Those are just the defaults and recommended. I usually recommend like, you know, N-2, All right, there's a bunch of other stuff in here. There's like a main page, some app shell stuff, but I really want to talk about this folder over here called platforms. And this is where some platform specific code lives. Now, for example, on Android, there's this main application and activity, and this is just some startup code that .NET MAUI needs to actually launch itself as well. So we can say it's a MAUI app activity. If I open this app delegate on iOS, there is this app delegate. But this is like actually iOS specific code. We can see it's using Foundation coming from iOS. There's an iOS namespace available to me as a .NET developer. I can come in, I can say using, core animation, core Bluetooth, core data, all these different APIs available to me as well there. So sometimes you do need to go in here. You need to like override a startup method. You need to change some stuff there, and you can do it all there. But at a core level, there's this app, and this app gives my application startup. So for example, I initialize the main app, which is going to load all my resources, and I can override things like on start, on sleep, on resume, on app link requested. So it even abstracts the app layer for me automatically. Now, this app shell is a newer concept in .NET MAUI, but what this gives us is a unified shell for our application where we can add flyout menus, bottom tabs, bottom and top tabs, and all sorts of good stuff across the board. It also gives us URL-based navigation routing. This is also a really nice feature of .NET MAUI. So if you're coming from the web world where you have routes like a URL, now when you navigate, you don't have to create pages, you don't have to register stuff. Every page has a route associated with it. So this home page has the route of main. And that main page is a bunch of XAML. Now you can write your UI in XAML or in C#. I prefer XAML just as my background, but you can write everything in C# with a Fluent API, and there's even a community toolkit called markup extensions, C# markup extensions that really make it even more streamlined to build and deploy with C#. So this application does a bunch of stuff. Let's just run it. I'm just going to tap on Windows machine. I'm on my Windows machine on Windows 11 here. But of course, this application would also run on Windows 10 as well. And what this is going to do is it's going to go through a native Windows compilation, deploy it, just like if I was building a application for Windows with WinUI 3, and deploy it onto my desktop right here. So there we go. We have Hello World. Over here, if I pull this side by side, in fact, what I'll do is, since I'm on one screen, I'm going to bring up this live preview over here. Let's just go ahead and size that over here and get sort of this side-by-side view of my application inside of Visual Studio, which is neat. I'll make this 180 so that it looks good. And then what I can do is I can select elements. So if I'm really interested, I could hover over any of these elements. I can get access to different properties about it. If I can click on it, right, and I can see exactly what's happening here. Here's the click counter. It says click me, and then it has some accessibility features, and it's calling this method counter clicked, which is cool. I also have some labels here. So again, if I want to like tap in on this, I can navigate directly to it, or I can also come over to this live visual tree, which is also another great feature. This gives me access to all of the hierarchy of my currently visible page. So we can see there's a content page, main page, scroll view, images, and labels. So if I want to navigate to it, I can navigate to it there as well. So many options with productivity features built in. What I can also do is I can say hello VS Live over here. And what that does is it updates in real time. And it's not just updating in this live preview over here, it's updating in my real running application, right? So it's my real application where I'm updating it right there. Now I can also click over here, let's say 5 times on this button. I can see it, update in real time over there, which is kind of cool. But what I can also do now is I can come into the code behind of this page. So every page has some code behind over here. And what I can do is I can look at the C# code associated with it. So if I wanted to, of course, I'm debugging this application. I could hit a breakpoint, right? I get, count is 10. It's going to go do some stuff. And if I'm using a screen reader, this is actually really cool, is accessibility is a first class experience in .NET MAUI. I can read back what's happening for anyone that maybe is visually impaired. Accessibility, all the features are first class. What this also means is I could do stuff like say plus equals 10. I'm going to hit save here, but I can also come up to this little tiny menu, which is the hot reload button. I guess I actually have to hit hot reload, so I'm going to hit it. I can also say hot reload on file save. And this little button is going to basically tell the .NET Runtime and .NET MAUI to hot reload my C# code. So what that means now is when I tap on this button over here, we're now incrementing by 10 every single time, which is really cool. Now, we'll see how far we can push this thing. So let's go back into my XAML. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another button. So let's do this here. Let's bring up my live over here. And let's add another button. And I'm going to say text equals check internet. Okay. I'm going to say horizontal option center. Let's see if that shows up. Boom, there it is. There's a button. And let's give it a clicked event and add a new one there. I'm just going to go ahead and save that over here. Cool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into my code behind, and here's this button clicked event. Now I want to check for internet connectivity. Now this is where things get really fascinating as a developer, is if I wanted to, I could come over into my Android code. I could add a new file here. I could access different platform features. But if I wanted to, I could come in over here to github.com/.net/MAUI and take a look at the source code, because one, it's completely open source. I could look at this essentials folder here and take a look at all of the different APIs available to me. So I have accelerometers, app info, barometer, browser, clipboard, connectivity, email, file pickers, geolocation, all this stuff, right? And let's look at connectivity. There it is. And let's look at some of the implementations. So for example, here we have an API available to us. So this API can give me connection profiles, network access, and also register when things change. I can then go over and say, oh, let me look at the Android implementation. And here's all the code that you didn't have to write. Basically, it handles everything for you automatically. And notice that we're accessing native APIs from Android in C#, which you could do yourself, but now you can do. And here it's handling all sorts of complexity. The Android networking stack is interesting. And look at that, yield returns. Who would have thought? I love a good yield return. Someone was asking on Twitter, what does yield do? It yields and it returns. It's amazing. I need to do a whole video on it. So anyways, look at this, hundreds of lines of code you didn't have to write. So let's get access to that puppy. Let's go back into my code over here. Now, if I do Microsoft, let me zoom in because I love it to zoom, Microsoft.maui. You can see we have things in here like authentication, animations, app model. App model gives me access to things like those app actions, app info, app package model, browser, communication, data transfer. That's cool. I could be like, oh, let me send like access contacts or send an email and things like that. I think this is in what? Networking, connectivity. That's cool. And then I could just say, let me get access to the network here. Okay, now this is already brought in, so I don't actually need all this stuff. So I can just say connectivity. I can say var has internet. I'll say equals. And I'll say, well, if the internet access equals, and say internet, then we have internet, right? So now what I should be able to do is I can say display alert. I'm going to say has internet question mark. And let's just output here has internet. That's great dialogue. And let's just say okay and hit go. Now we've hot reloaded it here. And I should be able to now come in, check internet, and sure enough, I have internet. Amazing. I didn't actually know if that was going to work. That's my favorite part of like half the stuff that's happening right now is like me as a developer, I just wrote code. I mean, granted, I was shaking and trembling up here, like if that was actually going to pop up that dialogue, but it did. And that's really cool. Now, of course, if I come over and I put this puppy in airplane mode, now my Bluetooth mouse stopped working. Now we can see here that has internet false, right? So I no longer have internet because I'm in this mode. So that's real. That's a real thing that happened. Give me access to my Bluetooth mouse, please. Oh my goodness. Okay, I can code again. All right, now that's really cool, right? And you're like, wow. And that's just like a hello world. Like I didn't even do anything. Like that's amazing. But now here's what's also cool. Let's go over here, and now let's go up into my drop down for debug. And what I can do is a few things. Is I can deploy to Android emulators. Now I'm also on Windows 11, which also has the Windows subsystem for Android. So I could actually deploy to my Windows machine as well. We can take a look at that. I can change the framework here. So if I change this to Android, this is going to pick an Android default for me. Now, we see a bunch of iOS stuff here, and this says, hey, I can deploy to a local device, to a simulator, or a remote device. There's two ways of doing this. I could connect remotely through the internet over here to my Mac, do a remote build. I'd get an iOS simulator over here. It'd be amazing. I can also plug my iPhone device right here into my Windows machine and use local iOS deployment if I have an Apple developer account. Or I could just bring my code over to a Mac. Well, let's go ahead and just deploy this really quick to Android. Now, what this is going to do is a little bit different. We saw previously that Windows was pretty fast. It's actually the default because we're like, hey, I think Windows, as we're developing these apps, it doesn't really matter where I'm developing it, whether it's on Android or iOS or Mac or Windows. My application is my app. It should just look, perform, and be the same, and those APIs should be the same. So on Windows, obviously, it has to go through a lot less compilation steps to do that deployment locally. For Android, this is actually going to take probably the first time building and deploying in about a minute. So I'll pretend just I can talk through the build steps here. But what it's going to do is compile our code for Android. It's then going to build a native Android package, detect the Android debug bridge. You can see right here, there's a bunch of Android packaging that just happened here in the debug folder. And then it's going to find my Android emulator that's local right here, and then deploy it to my Android emulator as well. So boom, there we go. So I have my, my app that comes up. I have Hello VS Live. I can click, I can check internet, and sure enough, I have internet that's coming in onto my device, which is really cool. It's the same app that I just deployed onto Windows, and now it's right over here, which is really cool. And all that code that I just wrote to access network access is all the exact same functionality, right? Question?
That's it clicked 60 times. If you just recompiled all that, how did that happen?
Oh, that's because here I was incrementing it by 10 when I changed that code. So here's that app 5 again. When I launched it, there's a splash screen and the app icon. And I tapped on it 6 times. Yeah, I just tapped real fast. Some people, keyboard people, me, mouse and button click. So that's what happened there, right? So we can see here we get that click, 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 click. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I could just change this to 1, hit, I guess I'm not debugging, so that's actually not going to do anything. To prove that I'm not debugging, it's going to continue to do that. But if I'm debugging, I can hot reload there, which is really nice. So now, if I want to get really crazy with this demo, let's add it to source control. Cool. Let's, I guess, re-enter my credentials. Okay. Yay. Let's go ahead. I'll save this under MIT. Perfect. Let's add a README. That just seems like a best practice. Public. Let's just push it. And then, yeah, that should be on the internet. It works. Amazing. Okay. Now, let's go to github.com/James Montemagno. Not this pull request that I already closed some code on. This is my personal machine. Oh, there's me. Cute. Maui app 5. Awesome. Let's go over here. Let's go ahead and clone this thing. This is going to be cool. Cool demo, James. Cool. Let's just go over here. Where am I? Let's CD documents, ls. Let's CD GitHub, ls, junk, git clone. Let's paste this in there. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, let's just go and open it, I guess. Now let's open this. I'm in Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. I'm going to go into my GitHub folder. I'm going to go into Maui app 5. Rad. There's my solution. Let's open it up. Cool. All right. Now over here, I get the same exact nice features. I get all the dependencies. We can see now we have Android, iOS, and Mac Catalyst. So if actually, if I right click on this and I say, let me edit the project file, we get the same project file, but here we're just referencing, we're not on Windows. So I'm not adding Windows as a target over here. So it doesn't like mess up stuff, but I have the same page over here. There we go, incrementing, hello VS Live, all this stuff. And ideally what I should be able to do is just hit debug. I didn't rehearse this, so we're gonna see if it all works. And this is gonna build up, actually, what I can see over here is a native Mac application. So my Mac, I'm just gonna deploy locally right here. Let's just see here. It's gonna build that up and deploy it, hopefully. We'll give it a second here to do its thing. Okay, Just got my code behind. Perfect. Output, you can do it.
James,
Yeah, question.
you haven't discussed like running on Linux or Raspberry Pi.
Oh, yes. So .NET MAUI itself, question was like Linux, Raspberry Pi, things like that. .NET MAUI itself supports iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows for the UI framework and deployment targets today as the first class deployment targets that it does. For like Raspberry Pi and stuff like that, there are specific .NET things available, basically available to that. And Linux today, there are no support, well, there's a community sort of supported flavor out there for .NET MAUI, but no official thing from Microsoft for Linux at this time. Yeah, just GA'd, so it just released. So gotta give it some time. All right, I don't know what's going on here. Oh. Is it doing it? Oh my God, it's all happening. Just need to be patient. Oh, there's my app icon. It's bopping around. Boom, check it out. I'm in dark mode, so I actually get a dark screen over here, which is really cool. I can click, click, click. I can check internet access, and boom. Notice here that I'm getting those native dialogues as well, because it's native UI over here on Mac OS, right? And if I came over and I stopped debugging, and I went over here, I can see all of my iOS simulators over here, which is pretty cool. I think I had this one recently open. Let me look. Let's open a simulator. Yep, iOS 13 Pro Max. I can just hit debug here. This should, of course, now build my iOS application and my iOS simulator here. And this should, of course, now just kind of build and compile my iOS application. I could also go and build and deploy my application on Android over here as well. So kind of up to you. Here we go, we're connected up. It's cool that the tooling all just sort of works as well. So here we go, we get my .NET logo for my splash screen. A bunch of debugging things are happening. And sure enough, I click, 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 and sure enough, I can check internet. I get a native iOS dialog. Bingo, bango. All right. Wow, time flies. All right. Awesome. Let's talk about the ecosystem over here. Now, first and foremost, .NET MAUI is brand new. It just G8. Oh, question.
Sorry.
No, don't ever be sorry in life.
Support for web applications, or would you just have to build another web application?
Getting there. Web app, getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get there. Good question, though. All right. So .NET MAUI is new. It just G8 in May, the SDK. The nice part is that many of the existing Xamarin plugins and libraries can easily be upgraded and migrated over. And same thing with user interface. There's a backwards compatibility layer, or they can be updated to .NET MAUI APIs as well. Tons of control vendors like Telerik, Syncfusion, DevExpress, UXDivers have already been doing this. Tons of great community packages, including my own, like in-app billing and store review, which are like down over there, which is amazing. I updated it in like a day. So some of this work is really streamlined and smooth, and we're seeing a lot of great stuff come from the community and from different vendors out there as well. So cool things like Maui Pane is from Javier, who's actually one of the engineers on the team doing customization. He's using some of the new built-in menu APIs in the sample, which is really cool, like wrap grid, stuff like that. There's a new MVU code first experiment, which is called Comet. That's actually from Microsoft, which is cool. The JetBrains team over there have been working on integrating it into Rider. People have been building cool games with it, like Sean Lawrence, who actually built a game engine over here, which is really cool. People have been cloning UI, such as Matt over here. Naweed has a Wordle clone, which is cool. And people have been building all these really beautiful, elegant user interfaces with .NET MAUI, and the thing just came out. And I think that's what's really neat, is even though it's just been a few months since release, we're starting to see components, we're starting to see the ecosystem, we're starting to see all this stuff come up in real time, including a beautiful reference sample application that I got to work on myself called the .NET Podcast application. Now, I don't know if Scott showed this during the keynote, but I'm going to show it again, which I think is just a really powerful demo in general. So here, what we have is .NETpodcast.com. I wanted to buy a domain name and own it, so I did. And it just redirects to free hosting. So, so this is a ASP.NET Core Razor template application. So it's just a beautiful web app, and it's hitting some backend .NET APIs. This application, if I hit sign in, is a Blazor application. So this is written with Blazor WebAssembly. It's powered backends, like I said, with web APIs. It also has a powerful scaling backend with Azure Container Apps from microservices. And this enables me to come in, to listen, to pick a podcast, to subscribe to a podcast. I can say listen later. I can look at my subscriptions. There's Merge Conflict. That's a podcast by me. That's cool. I can look at the listen later list. I can go settings, light theme, dark theme, all that goodness going in there. Now, when it comes over to bring this to desktop and to mobile, we built a .NET MAUI application. So if I pull up this over here, we can take a look that we have a .NET MAUI application. Over here, we have a bunch of pages. So categories, shells, episode titles, listen later pages, settings pages, show detail pages, subscription pages. We have view models for everything. We're storing things locally for online, offline, listening back locally. We also are using like cool C# 10 features like global usings across my application, which is nice. We also have the shared library, which actually is a bunch of iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows audio playback code. So here we want to use the native players, native integrations. So we're accessing things like AV Foundation over here, or the Android Media libraries, which is really cool. So we're accessing all that native code. We actually plan on taking this and turning it into a package, which would be kind of nice. Now, if I load this up over here, I actually have two apps over here. I have this one here, which is going to be my Windows app, which is cool. I can tap on a podcast. I can get that information. I can subscribe to it. I can look at my subscriptions. I can go and do a bunch of stuff. I can play back a podcast. I get playback. It's coming through the HDMI probably. It's there. I can also come in and I could load this application over here on Android, right here. And I'm also going to load it on my Android subsystem for Windows over here as well. It's kind of like has like different like scaling and different things like that. So I can tap on episodes over here. I can subscribe to podcasts. I can do all the stuff that I did on my web app, but written natively here on the platform. So I get like these nice little animations that are going on as I scroll in, and all sorts of good stuff in here, right? So I can get around, get native UI. I can go in, set dark mode, things like that. So I get all this nice native-y goodness that's coming in, searching for podcasts. Oh, get a crash, native crash, which is always good. Get all that good stuff going on. So you can really build these like high fluid applications as well. Now, the other thing though, is that someone just asked, well, what about web applications? James, you just showed off this beautiful native, .NET MAUI application, acts in native control. It's a real application, right? You could take this and create your own podcast app with it right away. So some people say, well, hey, Well, what about if I'm a web developer, right? Or I have a web team, or I want to just deploy to the web? What are my options? Well, with .NET MAUI, it's a flexible platform for developers to access native controls or build hybrid applications with Blazor. So Blazor is our full stack web app development framework that's built on top of ASP.NET Core. It's part of ASP.NET Core. It enables you to build applications completely in HTML, Razor syntax with data binding, and in C# instead of JavaScript. Now, the cool part about Blazor is that it runs in multiple modes. It runs in server, it runs in WebAssembly like I just showed you, and gives you access to all of that .NET goodness as a .NET developer building web apps. Now, of course, Blazor just targets the web, and .NET MAUI just targets desktop and mobile and tablet devices. But with a beautiful morph transition thanks to PowerPoint, we can bring these two things together in something that we call Blazor Hybrid. Now, in this instance, the goal is that I have web components. I have an ecosystem of web components, and I want to bring them to native client applications and access native client features. And that is why the Blazor team worked directly with the .NET MAUI team to integrate Blazor Hybrid into .NET MAUI as a first-class experience. So what this means is that I could have that Blazor website, and I could go down and bring it in to a native application, but still use native audio playback, for example. That's an example of what I could do. Or I could mix and match. I could use a little bit of Blazor, just a single screen, single component, and then go ahead and use native UI for the rest of it. So this means that I get to reuse existing web development skills, still access native capabilities, mix and match UI, and reduce development time. It also means that I can now, as a .NET MAUI developer, use the entire .NET MAUI ecosystem and the entire Blazor ecosystem too. Awesome. So that means that I can build applications like this. I can have some iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, and Blazor in there as well. Shared Blazor components there. Now, someone might be asking, well, can I take my XAML and bring it to the web? Not with .NET MAUI. No, we do the inverse. Bring the web to the native application platform there. There is a great .NET ecosystem of other frameworks that do some things like that, like Avalonia or Uno. Those are from different companies and community, and those are available. To me, it's one big happy .NET family. Hopefully you find something that picks for and works for you. So really quick, let me show you what this looks like at a high level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in to Visual Studio 2022. I'm going to close some stuff here. And I'm going to create a new project. But this time, I'm going to create this .NET MAUI Blazor app. I'm going to go ahead and create that, call it MAUI App 6, .NET 6 version. And this time, instead of using that native APIs with native controls, I'm going to be using Razor syntax here and integrating Blazor into this app. So if I go over here, it has all of the advantages that we have from .NET MAUI. We have all the platform integrations. We have all of the resources available to us for all of our splash screens and app icons. But we also have all of our Razor syntax, pages, everything over here like that, which is really cool. We are able then to access CSS, JavaScript, anything we want, or just stay happy over here in the world of .NET. So here I have a C#, I have some HTML, I have some button clickers, I have some Blazor code here. And now what I'm able to do is look at my MAUI program. This has the same, I didn't show the startup before, but it has this startup class. The difference with this one compared to my other application that I didn't show, I don't know why I hit it, is that it just registers some Blazor stuff. That's it. Over here, it uses a MAUI app, configures fonts, and builds it up. And in our main page, instead of accessing those scroll views, those native controls, it accesses a native web view control. Now, under the hood, that's going to use the native web control on each platform, like WebView 2 or iOS or Android WebView. So if I hit debug here, what we're going to see is that I'm going to build up a native application for iOS, or for Windows, I mean. And in this instance, it's going to have a native app container, and it's going to be running natively with native.NET. Blazor Hybrid with .NET MAUI runs in a third mode. There is no server, there is no WebAssembly. With .NET MAUI, .NET's already there. So it just uses the super highly optimized .NET. And here it is. This is my Blazor running locally, all self-contained over here as well. If I F12, what can I do? How do I bring up 12? There we go. I can bring up my dev tools. I can look at elements. I can see all the stuff that's happening here, right? It's a web application running on port 000/counter, right? So I have access to that. Now again, I can mix and match as much or as little as I want. Take a look at Blazor Hybrid, because you could use like native tabs here. You could embed different controls. So lots of capabilities there as well, which is cool. And of course, you can share all those components across the wire. All right, let's wrap it up, because I got 4 minutes. Whew. Awesome. So this means as a .NET developer, I got a lot of options. If I want to create web apps, I got Blazor, ASP.NET Core. I can create sites. I can create PWAs. I'm web. I'm happy. I'm over there. If you want to go all C#, all XAML with .NET MAUI, boom, you're good to go, creating native applications. Or you can sit in the middle here if you desire to bring Blazor and .NET MAUI together and create those hybrid applications. So I think it's really powerful, and we're just at the beginning. With .NET 6, .NET MAUI is GA, the tooling is GA, but of course, with .NET, you get a new .NET every year. So .NET 7 is up and coming, and there's a real big focus on desktop. Some context menus, hover gestures, right-click gestures, title bar, tooltips, maps are coming to mobile, and different new platform interop is coming as well. And when I say it's integrated into .NET, .NET MAUI ships with .NET. Every year, we get a new version of .NET, a current and an LTS release, same quality, just different product lifecycle support. For me, I know as a mobile developer, I upgrade as soon as humanly possible because I want to upgrade and support those new platforms. But what it also means is that .NET MAUI as an optional workload is an external dependency, so it can be updated to support the latest versions of Android and iOS if Apple and Google have different update requirements. We can still upgrade and sort of patch, if you will, .NET MAUI with updates to .NET 7, 8, or 6 as it goes. So we get those major releases and we get those patches and everything going, which is really cool. And additionally, if you are a Xamarin developer or a Xamarin Forms developer, you'll have full support still with Microsoft's amazing support lifecycle all the way until May of 2024. So there will be new versions of iOS and Android being supported on Mac for Xamarin and Xamarin Forms as well. But you can also start migrating today. You can go to .NET/MAUI, and of course you can install Visual Studio as well. And with that, thank you all so much, and fill out those surveys. I got a few minutes, so any questions? I appreciate people interrupting, and you weren't interrupting. It's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to ask questions, so we're here in person. Question there real quick.
For like app permissions, does MAUI automatically take care of that for you, or by what you're using?
Yeah, great question. Permissions was the question that this gentleman had. So if you're using a built-in API, that's all going to be handled for you automatically. However, if you go to the documentation, look at this platform integration, and what we'll see here on overview is you can look at all of the different APIs, and here's the permission API. It's all built in for you automatically, and we'll show you all the different permissions that you have access to cross-platform that are supported on the different platforms. So you can easily check and request platform permissions. Great question. There's a lot built in there. Question right behind him.
Is there any tools out there for moving your existing Xamarin apps over to MAUI?
Great question. Question was, hey, I'm an existing Xamarin developer. I want to migrate to .NET MAUI. What can I do? There's two things right now. The most straightforward path is that there's a wiki page that basically outlines the steps you go through. There is a .NET Upgrade Assistant tool, and the .NET MAUI support is being added there. The difference is that will go through and sort of change the namespaces, give you warnings, and do stuff. It won't migrate it into a single project for you. .NET MAUI actually still supports those multiple projects there. But that being said, I recommend also taking a look at some of the videos on the .NET YouTube, my YouTube, and others, because myself, as I'm migrating my own apps, it also means that I want to use the new dependency injection service. I want to use constructor injection. I want to use the MVVM toolkit for .NET and remove all that legacy code and really streamline my process. So to me, it's two steps. Upgrade, just get things working, and then it's like, what's all the new stuff in .NET MAUI, like app icons, fonts, all that stuff that I used to have to do manually that I could do as well. So those will be manual steps in the process. So good question. Question over here?
Oh yeah, I had a question about the emulator.
Yes.
So whenever you run it, does MAUI install it everything for you, or do you install like?
Oh, good question. Question had about emulators and simulators like that. So obviously Windows is Windows, Mac is Mac. The iOS simulators come from Xcode. So you install Xcode on your machine, you need it for iOS development. Over for Android, here, up in Tools, Android, there's an SDK and Device Manager. If you don't have one, it'll just show like Android emulator and it'll walk you through the steps of creating a new one. So we have our own thing here. And it automatically uses the same tools that Android Studio uses to detect and update things there as well. So good question.